Welcome to our new podcast called Meeting David Attenborough.
Yeah.
He's Billy.
And he's Tom.
I don't know if that's going to be a thing every week. I don't know.
Probably not.
No. But here we are. Welcome to our new podcast.
Yeah.
Which we're going to do until we meet David Attenborough because of it.
Yeah. When we get the recognition that we will inevitably rightly deserve.
Oh yeah, definitely. He won't know what's coming for him.
He's going to be getting it all over Twitter.
Oh yeah.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Episode 10 will have met him.
yeah. And then what we do? Like, move on to someone else.
I guess so. Who's bigger than David Attenborough?
That's a good point. In this area of research, it's I don't know, Charles Darwin.
We're going to exhume Charles Darwin.
Anyway, Billy, how are you doing, man?
I'm pretty good. I just finished uni.
Congratulations. Congrats.
So, done 4 years.
4 years.
Yeah.
How does it feel to be done?
It feels freeing.
Yeah.
There's the whole world for me to look at now.
Yeah. It did for me as well. It did.
Well, all 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, exactly.
You're so worldly now.
That's it. There's so much appreciation.
Setting up a podcast.
yeah, exactly. So let's talk about what's in today's episode.
Yes.
So I think we're going to start off with an episode, with a segment, on your favourite organism.
Quetzalcoatlus. Oh, Quetzalcoatlus.
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 Yeah.
It's a pterosaur. Won't get too much into all these topics as well. Obviously, you got to have to listen on. If you want to hear these.
Yeah, definitely.
Let
me talk a little bit about the Cambrian period.
Yeah. Cambrian Explosion.
Yeah.
Specifically, it's a period of rapid evolutionary change. It's very cool.
Yeah, it is, and we talk about a couple of key organisms from then.
Yeah.
Key because some of them are cool and some of them actually are important in evolutionary terms.
Yeah. The sort of the first step for a lot of branches that we still see today. And then after that, a little segment that we're doing, looking at modern, like very recent scientific discoveries.
Yeah.
And this week we've decided to look at army ant sort of evolution. Evolution of army ant raids.
Yeah.
And how those have changed through time.
Yeah. It's going to be some good stuff.
Yeah. So hope you enjoy it.
Yep. Hope you enjoy. And here's the podcast, Meeting David Attenborough. So today's organism that we'll be talking about, this week's show is, it's your favourite. It's your favourite fossil or favourite organism, Billy?
One of my favourite fossils.
Yeah.
And organism, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. I guess we shouldn't keep on waiting too long. So it's Quetzalcoatlus? Quetzalcoatlus, yeah. So, I mean, what on earth was it?
It was, as far as I'm aware,
Yeah.
It was the largest pterosaur that's ever been uncovered.
Okay.
So I guess maybe we should say what a pterosaur is first, just in case people don't quite know. So a pterosaur is related as a sister group of the dinosaurs.
Yeah. The family of flying reptiles.
Yeah.
Including obviously the most famous, the pterodactyl.
Yeah.
I think that's, who doesn't know really about the pterodactyl sort of thing, but
no. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So, and they were prominent. Certainly, the pterosaurs were most prominent during the Mesozoic.
Yeah.
So we're talking from 252 to 65 million years ago was the Mesozoic.
Yeah, same as the dinosaurs.
Yes, yeah.
And they all went extinct. Well, the ones that were still around went extinct with the dinosaurs.
Oh, that fateful night. Yeah. So this Quetzalcoatlus, like, I mean, like, how big are we talking, for instance? So flying reptile. I mean, I can't really imagine them ever getting that big.
Well, it's the biggest. It's bigger than any bird, definitely.
Bigger than any bird today or back then? Like,
oh, ever.
Yeah.
Ever. It's supposedly the biggest thing that's ever flown. So it was. They were, I think, roughly around 3 meters tall. Imagine about the height of a male giraffe.
No way.
And they were the wingspan, I think, is around 10 meters.
Yeah.
So that was like, I mean, imagine like a small like plane.
Yeah, I was gonna say like
that's only got like space for like a pilot and a co-pilot.
Yeah. So
like a light aircraft.
Yeah, like a sort of Cessna or something like that.
Or like a glider.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. That's basically how big they were.
Is that? I'm not great on planes, but how long is a double-decker bus? Just looking this up. How long is or just a bus? It doesn't need to be double-decker. So buses are normally 14 feet. 14 feet. So it's just a little bit smaller than a double-decker bus. Its wingspan. Oh wait, what did we say? Oh, 10 meters. So.
Yeah.
So it's 4 meters. 4.3 meters is like a London Red bus.
So it's about two and a half then.
Yeah. So it's one for each wing, effectively, isn't it?
Yeah.
Each wing is a double-decker bus.
Yeah, that's insane. That's why I love it. It's because it's just so like, how the hell does that thing even exist? Like,
yeah. Oh my days! I can't believe that. It's saying here as well, mass of 200 to 250 kilos.
Yeah, which is tiny.
Yeah.
Like for how big. I mean, I'm not actually sure about this, but obviously birds have hollow bones, and I think pterosaurs have hollow bones.
Yeah, that's certainly something we need to look into.
And it would definitely make sense if they. I mean, how would it be so light if not?
Yeah, of course, actually, yeah, definitely. I've just found out here as well. It did have a nickname. It was called the Mexican Feathered God.
Oh, because this name is based on that.
Oh, okay. It's a binomial name.
Yeah. Quetzalcoatl is like the feathered serpent god of the indigenous people.
Really?
Yeah. So they give it that name.
That's epic. That's so cool.
Yeah, it is.
So was it found over there then in Mexico?
It's been found in North America, like sort of Texas and stuff. But also, I think they found some in Europe. And I remember hearing them, because I watched a documentary on this once.
Yeah.
They were talking about how they think it would have been like a scavenger that would have just been able to glide, basically just glide. Like it didn't really need to use a lot of energy once it got off the ground.
Yeah.
And I remember they were saying like, oh, maybe it could have glided like halfway across the globe or something. Just going around scavenging on like sauropods and stuff. Because, because like vultures go around scavenging on stuff now. But if the stuff they're scavenging on is a lot bigger, then they can be a lot bigger, like.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
That's actually so cool.
Just getting on like the hot air plumes and stuff, staying up for like an albatross kind of thing.
Yeah.
But just much, much bigger. Yeah, I love it.
That's insane. Like so it was predatory as well. Was it predatory at any time?
Well, I think that they think it was predatory, but only on small prey because it was fragile.
Right. Yeah.
So it was I've read previously that it was mostly a scavenger.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, of course. And its range, its temporal range, I mean...
it's late Cretaceous.
Okay.
So, I mean, the Cretaceous is when things got really... At least predators got really big, didn't they, in the Cretaceous?
Yeah. So, late Cretaceous, just to clarify, we're talking about 100 to about 65 million years ago. That's for the late Cretaceous. The Cretaceous as a whole was from 145 to 65 million years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So the last period of the Mesozoic. So we're sort of talking right at the very end that this giant flying reptile lived.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's because I mean at that time we were kind of seeing giant organisms, right? I mean we're not talking in terms of like terrestrial fauna.
Yeah.
We were seeing sort of giant. I mean that was when like you had some giant dinosaurs roaming the land and and I'm trying to think about the climate at the time, but you had greenhouse climate, so it was warmer than it was today.
And there was I think no ice or very little, so there was a much higher sea level.
Yeah. Just having a look at how warm the Cretaceous was. Lovely. Yeah, so we're saying the poles were devoid of ice at the time, and temperatures were up to 35 degrees C in the oceans.
Pretty warm.
So pretty warm, yeah, definitely. I'm assuming that's surface oceans. So that's the environment that this kind of giant reptile would have lived in.
I'm just looking now at something which was people have been arguing basically about what they thought its feeding patterns were.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And some people have suggested that it was a fisher, and that it would skim feed over the ocean instead.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Sort of because its jaws seem like in a similar orientation to skimmers today, to birds today.
Yeah. Certainly, if it had that gliding capability, then it could probably swoop down over the land. Yeah, that's interesting. So that's sort of arguing against the scavenging idea, I guess.
Yeah, I'm not really sure. I mean, obviously, I haven't studied this in detail, but either way, it's very cool. I just can't get over how cool it is.
It is awesome, man. And like to be one of the largest like flying animals of that time, because to think about when you think about organisms that fly as such, you don't think of them as being overly large. Modern birds today, for example, aren't massive. I mean, I guess the albatross, maybe the largest, or certainly some kind of seabird like that.
Condors, maybe?
Condor, yeah. But that is nothing compared to how big this was, this organism. And like, if you take a look at images and you just see it, or certainly artist reconstructions, it just looks quite bizarre in terms of, it looks like so it sort of looks like it was able to walk about on its wings. I mean, I don't know if that's the sort of the artist's impression I'm looking at. Yeah, this just the impression on that you can see on Wikipedia. But yeah, so I mean, quite a bizarre looking pterosaur, from what we've seen.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, as far as I'm aware, they haven't found any skin, anything like that. So we don't know what colours it was or anything like that.
Yeah, right.
So take all that with a pinch of salt, I guess, because I'm looking at one now and it's bright red, and I'm like,
right,
probably wasn't bright red.
I'm a target up here.
To
all the dinosaurs. Yeah, that's what. So has there been like a full body fossil found of it, or I'm just having a look now. It doesn't. I don't think there have been.
No, I don't think so. There's been skull.
Yeah.
And they found. I'm pretty sure they found wing.
Bone.
Yeah, wing bone. I'm not sure what the technical which wing bone it was, but I know that they found some of that in Texas.
Oh, okay, yeah, Texas. Okay, yeah, so we're talking North American habitat.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so to understand where this Quetzalcoatlus thing comes from, then we've got to go right back to a time called the Cambrian. So this is right at the beginning of the Phanerozoic eon. So just to explain what that means. So geological time is broken down into, eons and periods and such. And the time we're in now is the Phanerozoic, the overarching time.
Mm-hmm.
And right at the beginning of that, about 540 million years ago, was the Cambrian Explosion.
Mm.
And that's what we're going to talk about here.
Yeah. So it was quite the revolutionary event.
It was.
We're talking about complete reordering and restructuring of the marine environment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and remember this is before there was any terrestrial organisms.
Yeah.
So all life was in the ocean.
Yeah. So a couple of 100 million years before life came onto land.
Mm.
So 540 million years ago, man. Right.
Yeah. So at this time was when all or nearly all modern animal phyla appeared.
Mm.
So this is the it's to do with classifications of organisms based on their ancestry, really, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. So like humans being Homo sapiens, that's the genus and the species. But further up than that, we're starting to see the groups that these species come under. Most of these groups came about at this time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I sort of used to think, and I think it was sort of almost common knowledge, that this Cambrian explosion was the start of life, if you like. But that's certainly what I used to think. But then when you learn about it a bit more, it's just that life before that was a little more limited and much more primitive and a bit more sparse.
Yeah.
But so sort of the theory encompasses sort of what differences before and after. I mean, like, we're sort of seeing only really soft-bodied organisms before.
Yeah.
Before this major event, which obviously means that not much of that stuff is even preserved. I mean, it's only found in a few places around the world. These sort of trace fossils, so these fossils which are made by the organism moving or living in a certain place. I mean, actually, there wasn't really that much movement, was there, before?
No, really. A lot of them were stationary.
Yeah. So this event came about, and then what new modes of life came about?
Suddenly, I mean, so the reason it's the Cambrian Explosion is just like why it's given that name is because it's suddenly all of this diversity appears.
Yeah.
And for the first time, we see hard-bodied organisms.
Okay, yeah.
So that's when preservation begins to increase.
Yeah.
Things that have shells or
small shelly fossils.
A rudimentary sort of skeleton, but it's not made of the same things that skeletons are made of now.
Yeah.
That kind of idea.
Like armor plating came about, I think, as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess what ultimately that sort of what we were seeing was maybe even a change in predation.
Definitely, yeah. Because motility also increased. So before the Cambrian Explosion, a lot of things were just we know they're animals because they were living at depths where they wouldn't have sunlight.
Okay, yeah.
So they must have been consuming filter feeding.
Yeah, so plankton eaters.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. So in the Cambrian, what we see more like organisms actually attacking other organisms and
yeah, because the motility. Oh, well, we don't know which way around it comes, I guess.
Yeah, of course.
Was the motility there that then led to the predation, or was the predation that led to the motility?
Yeah, no.
But it led to an evolutionary arms race of sorts.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So
yeah.
Stuff started eating other stuff, basically, or certainly other large organisms. And I think we're going to talk a little bit about the organisms a bit later on.
Yeah, because there were some pretty cool ones.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, some crazy stuff. But first we'll just talk a little bit about what actually caused the whole event.
Yeah.
Because obviously it was so long ago, this event. We don't, there's speculation as to what actually caused the event, what could have been responsible, and geological evidence, as we've studied for the past half a decade, we know doesn't last long over time. Plate tectonics destroy it, it gets eroded, it gets metamorphosed. So there's a lot of speculation about what actually caused this.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what does the literature kind of say? I mean,
well, there seems to be. I mean, there's a few different ideas that are bandied around, and it's probably a combination of a few different things.
Yeah.
So one that I quite like is that sort of before the Cambrian, there was a sort of snowball Earth.
Okay.
State. So that means that the surface of the Earth was mostly, or definitely to a much higher degree than today, covered in ice, and temperatures were much lower. And then as the ice receded, sort of before the Cambrian, but not long before really, then this sort of resulted in release of nutrients into the oceans.
Okay, so that were previously like locked up in the ice.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And also allowed for changes in weather patterns and ocean circulation and that kind of thing. So then that had an impact and potentially allowed these organisms to increase their nutrient intake and then diversify.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that seems reasonable because it's almost like those limiting factors. Sorry, those nutrients are limiting factors to life.
Yeah.
Sort of radiating before that time.
Yeah. And then obviously, like when talk about the evolutionary arms race, like once that starts, whatever starts it, organisms will just go extinct unless they are keeping up with it.
Yeah.
Sort of the Red Queen, which is an idea that organisms have to evolve in order to just stay in the same place, sort of ecologically. If you don't evolve, then you'll either be relegated to a less favourable environment, say one that's got lower oxygen levels and therefore not as many organisms can live there and predation is lower.
Okay.
Or you'll go extinct.
Which would you choose?
I'd probably just go extinct. Can't be bothered. Can't be bothered evolving.
It takes too long, man. It takes too long. Yeah, those are Red Queen drivers. Wow. So that was one idea, the nutrients coming into the ocean. I do remember something about oxygen as well, possibly being a driver. So I think the idea was that with the receding of the ice from the snowball Earth, then oxygen could be more freely released or something. Is that the kind of theory, or I don't know if I've if I'm remembering that quite right.
I think that was right.
Yeah. So the idea of all this oxygen being locked away, I'm not sure whether it was in the ice or whether it was in sediment, possibly, but yeah, you had this input of free oxygen into the ocean, this sudden input, which is shown in like atmospheric records, and I think at this time as well we sort of see a sort of thin band of oxidized iron being deposited at this time. So there was definitely an increase in sort of free oxygen at the time.
Yeah.
And then that's possibly an idea of the increase in oxygen allows organisms to grow larger, to grow more complex sort of morphologies and
because if your respiration rate is higher, then your metabolism can be higher, motility higher, all that kind of thing.
And you can evolve new features as well, and so new species come out of that.
Just one more that I'm looking at here is people have thought about ozone formation, and then maybe that formation of ozone. I'm not quite sure how this ozone formed, but I think that the formation of the ozone layer happened at the time.
Okay.
And that this would have reduced the impact of ultraviolet radiation.
Oh, of course.
And then organisms would have been able to free to live higher in the water column,
right? Rather
than just in the deep, where the radiation would have hurt.
Okay. Yeah. So there would have been basically the solar rays wouldn't have been as damaging when ozone forms, of course. I imagine that could be linked to the idea of more free oxygen coming about, because I think ozone forms in the atmosphere when it's bombarded with rays. The oxygen molecules just bond to form O3. Ozone. So there's some really interesting theories on.
And I'm guessing it's probably a combination of things, because there's been multiple snowball Earths and they didn't lead to the Cambrian Explosion.
That's a really interesting point, actually. Yeah.
So it must have been something to do with multiple
combined factors.
Yeah.
That's actually quite interesting that there haven't been any before.
I guess we only had bacteria back then anyway.
Yeah.
But still, you might have expected, if it was purely down to the snowball Earth, then you would have expected to see some sort of radiation afterwards.
Yeah, true.
In the previous ones.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe there was, but we don't have evidence for it.
No.
Like within the bacterial realm, I guess.
That's a good point. Yeah. I like that.
Well, thanks. So that's the causes of it. Next, we'll talk about what organisms formed.
So let's talk about the kind of organisms that were actually coming out of this Cambrian explosion. Now, obviously, there were a lot of small shelly fossils that came out. Some families like brachiopods started to emerge, but they're not quite the ones that we'll be looking at today.
No. Because we're going to look at some cool ones.
Yeah. We're going to look at the cool ones, basically. Or certainly the ones that are so removed from what we've seen today, from what exists in modern oceans, that it's just they're just so different from what we see. So first one that we're going to look at is one of our favourites from that time, Opabenia, which is such an unusual organism. I mean, I would suggest going and looking at it as well. All of these, definitely, because the artist reconstructions of them are all wild. They're all so different from what we know. So
it seems like they're sort of evolutionary dead ends.
Yes,
in a way. Especially Opabenia.
So this organism was I mean, it's quite hard to describe, actually. I mean, so it was only about, average length was about 5.7 centimetres, it says. And it had sort of, it had like its little body had sort of lobes on either side of it, sort of like, sort of like flapping fins kind of thing, but sort of that ran down the length of its body.
Like a cuttlefish.
Yeah, like a cuttlefish.
So individual segments rather than just one continuous sort of
like fin kind of thing. Yeah, exactly. So it's assumed that they were sort of to help it, like they would ripple, and then that's how it would sort of move through the water. But the most interesting part, obviously, is with its head. So first of all, it has 5 eyes on stalks, which is something that we definitely don't see today.
Why 5? Like, what is the one in the middle? Seeing that the ones aren't seeing.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
How is that? There's no. I mean, I can just imagine that it sort of was like testing it out, probably. I mean, because that again is an evolutionary dead end. That it was, and I think they were on stalks as well because Opinia potentially lived close to the seabed. So obviously it needed eyes looking up mainly to sort of look for predators. And then also interesting as well is that it has so its mouth is underneath its head, but it faces backwards. But what we've got on the front is a long proboscis, so basically like a long tentacle at the front, which has got like a jaw kind of thing on the end, like a grabber. And so that grabber is effectively used to like search for like soft food in the sediment at the seafloor, and then it would pass it into its mouth, which is why the mouth is sort of backwards facing, because then it can just scoop up food with its long tentacle and then feed it into its mouth, kind of like an elephant, I guess.
I was just thinking that, yeah. But the mouth is on the back, like the back of the underside. Like,
yeah. So that's why it's kind of backward facing. So
that's weird though. You think, why would it?
Yeah.
Maybe is it the grabber is so long that it would be sort of weird to put it directly under where the grabber comes out of? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like it sort of needs to curve around a bit.
Yeah, exactly. So it's sort of thought that proboscis is sort of segmented, sort of, or certainly striated. So like a modern vacuum cleaner hose,
Right. Okay. Yeah.
And so it probably couldn't have got all the way around to feed itself directly.
Interesting.
So it had to go underneath and around the back of his head.
Cool.
But yeah, I mean, I think the eyes are definitely the most interesting part about it as well. The fact that it's got 5, and it's, it's just like, so yeah, it says here that it's assumed that all the eyes were actually quite compound, compound eyes, sorry, like
a fly's eyes.
Like a fly's eyes, yeah, exactly. So, so yeah, that's Opabinia really. I mean, its life habits were assumed to be sort of scavenging, predatory. Like I said earlier, with it would sift through the sediment to try and find soft-bodied sort of prey items or organic matter. And then in terms of its preservation as well, Opabinia didn't have any hard parts to it either, which I didn't realise.
Oh, I didn't realise that.
I didn't realise, yeah. It says, or the literature says that it didn't have necessarily mineralised skeletons or exoskeleton parts. So it did have like sort of harder parts than just totally soft body, but it was potential that was sort of like made of something like cartilage or something just a bit firmer than normal flesh. But it wasn't anything that it didn't have any mineralized parts, which I hadn't realized previously.
I didn't. I guess something we sort of should say is that like this is the first time eyes have ever been seen.
Oh yeah.
In these organisms, I mean.
Yeah.
Before this time, before the Cambrian Explosion, organisms didn't have eyes.
Mm.
So that's one of the amazing things, is the fact that all these things suddenly have eyes.
Yes. Yeah. Because there's the need to have eyes, you know. It's
because of the predatory and the
predatory, but also the environments as well. Like we said earlier, with them coming into shallower waters.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's, you know, they're actually seeing light and stuff, so they can they can finally use vision, you know.
Yeah.
Which is it's just insane thinking about when eyes developed, you know what I mean?
Yeah, how quickly they just appear.
Yeah, definitely. So, but so that was very much, it was what Opabenia was like, sort of quite an unusual thing, and smaller than we thought. So it's
really small.
Actually, doing the research into this has kind of surprised me a little bit.
Yeah.
About it being smaller than I thought, and only soft body.
Well, from a small organism to the biggest organism around at the time, by far, was Anomalocaris. Its name was. I mean, this is one of my favourites, and it has been. I think I learned about this in college.
Yeah.
I think 16 or something.
Yeah.
So this thing was this was basically the apex predator of the time.
Yeah. That
we know of. And it was absolutely huge compared to anything else. It was up to 1 metre long. Which, when you think about it, okay, it's only 1 metre. But
so much build up. And then 1 metre.
But when you think that some of the next biggest things were, less than 10 centimetres.
Yeah, well, like Opabenia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was just a giant. So it moved in a similar way to Opabenia did. Even though I believe it had more hard parts to it. I thought it had actually like hard exoskeleton. So the way this would feed is it also had like these kind of tentacles. Well, kind of tentacles at the front. There were these two protruding kind of. I'm not really sure what the name is for them, but there's two sort of protruding appendages that would have sort of spikes on the bottom of them. And they would then use these to like scoop up. Kind of imagine like an elephant, but there's two. And they have spikes on the bottom to help it grip things. And then it would have a mouth on the underside of its head that it would then just sort of scoop up the things directly into its mouth.
Okay, yeah.
So
we're talking macrophages, right? Consuming other large organisms as well.
It seemed like it would just consume anything that was.
Anything in its path.
Well, it was specialising in hard-bodied organisms.
Okay, yeah.
Trilobites, things like we'll come to those later. That kind of thing. And then this thing also had two eyes, again on stalks, on the top of its head.
Only two.
Only two this time. Much more reasonable.
Yeah, exactly. That's much more allowed at that time.
Yeah. No, like not too weird.
Yeah.
But yeah, so these have been also found like in like exceptional preservation.
Okay. Yeah.
Like all of these organisms, by the way, have been exceptionally preserved in some way. That's how we know about them.
Yeah.
But they found that like its gut was they've managed to find fossilized guts of.
Really?
Of Anomalocaris, and they said that the structure of the gut is a predatory structure.
Oh, okay.
So we know even from its gut that it was a predatory creature. So it seems beyond doubt that this is one of the earliest apex predators that has ever existed. It's amazing. Yeah, I love them.
That is so cool. That's great. Yeah. Just a little bit on exceptional preservation there. I mean, so exceptional preservation refers to when an organism is fossilized, but it's you have some soft parts of the body being preserved due to the nature of the material in which it was preserved in and the conditions which sort of followed. So usually you're talking sort of very low oxygen conditions that it's being preserved in, often fine-grained material, not much energy, so sort of low energy environment. So that sort of allows for these organisms to be preserved. The most famous example of a rock, or certainly a rock type, where this is most common for organisms of this age is the infamous Burgess Shale.
Yeah, in Canada.
Over in Canada, yeah.
Which I think all of these organisms have been found there, right?
Yes, yeah, definitely.
Not exclusively.
No,
but that was the first sort of instance.
Yes, yeah. I feel like the Chengjiang lithology over in China is now yielding a lot of fossils similar to this, similar to that age as well. So yeah.
I was just having a quick look while we talk about that as well, and they've also found coprolites of this, which is fossilized species, which contain trilobite shells.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So they definitely know trilobites.
So that's great. A direct evidence of literal predation.
Yeah, which is amazing. I mean, this is the first time that these are the first creatures that are doing this. It's like it's just amazing that they. I don't know.
Yeah.
And to get to a metre long as well. Why did it need to be a metre long when everything else is so small?
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe there were bigger things that we don't know about, but it seemed like it was just going on tearing the place up.
Yes, yeah. And that's interesting, because to get to a size like that whilst everything else is still small, it must have been getting constantly a lot of energy. Yeah. So constantly feeding, or there was something larger. I mean, I don't know whether it's been postulated whether it was cannibalistic, but
that would make sense.
Yeah. So I guess going back down the size scale now, and certainly going to something a little less well constrained than
just a little.
Than our previous two organisms. We find the organism called hallucigenia. I mean, what can we say about this organism? Because the thing is about it is even its name is reflective of what we know about it. As in, this organism is just, I mean, to put it in a crude way, it's just messed up. We do not know. Like, every fossil that we found of it, which isn't that many relatively, has just presented no conclusive estimation or results upon what this organism actually looked like, how it lived, its mode of life, and what it fed on, etc., etc.
Yeah.
And the best way that I can describe it is very much sort of, it just looks like a worm, but with sort of spines or protrusions sticking out on all sides. All sides of it has. So it's got sort of spines on what could be its top side, and then possibly legs underneath. But there's not even a conclusive way of saying how many legs it's got. I mean, the estimations range from 6 pairs of legs to 8 pairs of legs, and then we're not even sure whether they're legs.
We don't know if the spikes are on the bottom.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Not sure which way up it is.
Exactly, because there's so much debate over how it would have walked as well.
Yeah.
Just could it have walked on spikes, which was sort of been quite an evolutionary disadvantage to it, because articulated appendages, were becoming quite common at the time, and it'd be quite a hindrance if organisms were just sort of moving on individual spines. Unfortunately, there's no conclusion as to what actually this was. I mean, we're at a point still where we don't know where the head is, for this organism. I mean, several have been found which have got sort of like a dark smudge at one end, which initially researchers thought was just would have been the head, but then eventually that was put down to it's just sort of some kind of preservation anomaly,
right?
That just smudged it.
Yeah. So. I mean, I'm thinking as well, like, if this is meant to be like worm-like, surely it couldn't live in a sediment if it had spines. How would it have moved through the sediment with all the spines on it?
Yeah, so it would have. Well, yeah. Again, we don't know. I mean, estimates put it as like walking on the sediment, but then if it does have spines, is it not just going to sink into the soft sediment with its spines? It's sort of like. I mean, well, originally when they found it, even they thought it was part of something. So they even sort of thought it was part of Anomalocaris, possibly part of its appendage. One of its two appendages on the front. But they could sort of quickly resolve that from it being sort of separate from a different organism. To date, that's what we know anyway. But yeah, so there's still so much that we don't even know about it. I mean, estimates of length so far we know of ranging between sort of about 0.5 centimetre up to about 6 centimetres. So obviously, again, we're sort of only talking around a couple of inches in terms of size. But yeah, it's very much up for debate still about what this organism was, and how and its mode of life. So and then that harks back to what I said earlier about the name being representative of us not knowing anything about it. So hallucigenia, people were sort of saying that they were hallucinating, or that, when they first saw it, or that the organism was, or something. So that's certainly another interesting organism from the Cambrian.
Well, there's another one here that I think is worth a mention, because I feel like this is one of the only. It's probably the first organism we've talked about so far from the Cambrian that I know of that actually has descendants. Seems like all the others have just been evolutionary dead ends in some way.
Yeah.
But this is called the Pikaia, spelled Pikaia.
Okay,
I believe you pronounce it Pikaia.
Yeah.
And this is an ancestor of vertebrates. So all the organisms so far that we've talked about or at least we don't know that they had a sort of vertebral column. And this didn't have it wasn't a full vertebrate, but it had a chordate. It was running down the length of it. It was about 4 centimeters long. So again, they're all pretty small apart from Anomalocaris. That's when you can see how giant Anomalocaris was compared to everything else. But it had these sort of from the exceptional preservation, we've seen that it had these vertical lines going down its length that we think are muscle segments. So it wasn't hard-bodied apart from the cord. So they think that it moved probably like an eel would have moved. It was basically an eel. But it didn't. It was jawless. And sort of comparable to the modern day hagfish. They think it was something like that. A lot smaller than the modern day hagfish, obviously. But and not with a proper vertebrate. I think it's worth mentioning it because it is apparently the first vertebrate that we know of. We don't know a whole lot about it. But based on its anatomy, it seems as though it was the first vertebrate ever, and that's.
So we could have come from that organism. Eventually. A long way down the evolutionary route. So that is. I mean, it might not be because other organisms have obviously not been found from this time, but it has potential, certainly more than the other ones that we've talked about, to have actually been our ancestor.
Yeah, and another thing here is the sort of, so the nerve cord that ran down its back, in the sort of, in the head, one of the reasons we know that's the head, obviously it has the sort of plate, like dental plates, but also there's a swelling of the nerve cord in that part of the body, which is, they think, a precursor to a brain.
Oh, wow.
So it's like, because that's where the sense data was coming from, it needed to have the thicker nerve cord developed there.
Yeah.
And then, so it could process the information coming in as it was swinging forward, obviously the sense data, the visual data, because it didn't have eyes.
Okay, yeah.
So I think that was a primitive version of the brain, which is amazing.
It's looking more and more like our ancestor.
Yeah.
Wow. That's so cool.
Yeah.
It's just unusual to think about all of us stemming from an organism like that.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess extinction never really happens, does it? Because we all life lives on. But yeah, that's all really to say on that one. I feel like there's not a whole lot we know about it.
Yeah.
And it's really not very common either. It's not a very common organism compared to things like Anomalocaris.
Okay, yeah.
It was pretty rare.
Yeah.
So I guess it was only, maybe vertebrates were only really finding their feet at the time.
Yeah.
It hadn't fully reached its potential yet, definitely.
Yeah, of course. The old invertebrates taking the run there.
Yeah.
So I mean, I guess another group that sort of have ancestors, or certainly a long evolutionary time span, are the trilobites. So one of the most well-known organisms from that time, and certainly from the Paleozoic.
Because all these other organisms, by the way, were restricted to the Cambrian.
Okay,
They all, lived and died within the very early Phanerozoic. Whereas these trilobites, they existed for hundreds of millions of years.
Yes, yeah.
By far the most successful, probably some of the most successful organisms that have ever been.
Yes, yeah.
In terms of their temporal range, and probably their geographic range as well.
Likely. I mean, they just diversified themselves. They had such numerous modes of life that they had.
Yeah.
There were, eventually we were seeing informal species. We were seeing, that means within the sediment, so organisms living within the sediment. We saw organisms living on the sediment, on the seafloor. We saw swimming organisms. We saw tiny little trilobites that were planktonic and just would go with the flow. I feel like we should just quickly sort of clarify what they actually were.
I was just talking about them.
Sorry, get carried away about the modes of life. Classic paleoecologist there. So, I mean, these things were effectively, the best way to describe them as such is, now they're not related, so you can't think that they're in the same family or anything, but the best way to think of them are as kind of like wood lice, effectively. So,
sea wood lice.
Yeah, totally marine. So you have, very heavily armoured, sort of armoured plated organisms, arthropods. So in the same family as shrimps and lobsters and the like. But I guess that's the best way to sort of describe them.
Yeah, I think as a general model, because there's so many, there's little variations, big variations, I guess, between the different species and all that. But
definitely.
But as overall, it's sort of a wood lice looking creature.
Yeah.
Yeah, and these things existed all the way to the end of the Permian, which is so they existed from around 521 million years ago to around 252 million years ago.
Yeah.
So what, about 270 million years they were around, which is pretty impressive.
Yeah.
These little things.
Yeah, considering our time on the planet.
Oh yeah.
Of how little we've been here.
Mm-hmm. And these things were around way longer than any of the dinosaurs.
Yeah, exactly. And that were way older.
Yeah.
Way older than them. So yeah, I mean, like, to the end Permian, we're talking they were wiped out by the end Permian mass extinction.
The greatest mass extinction ever.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
AKA the Great Dying.
The Great Dying.
Yeah.
Great name.
Yeah, indeed.
Can't really blame them for failing that one, I'm afraid. Pretty much everything did.
Yeah. So we're talking over 90% of
95% of species.
95% of species went.
Yeah, on terrestrial and marine.
Yeah, went extinct at this time.
So can't really blame them for that one. But
yeah.
But anyway, to get back to what they were doing. So I think these are some of the first creatures. Well, definitely the eyes are very complex. They're known for having complex eyes.
Yeah.
Which were composite eyes, like you said before. But I think they were made of. I'm not sure if it's calcite or aragonite.
I think it was aragonite.
Yeah, they're made, which is a type of mineral.
Yeah.
That their shells are also made of. So their eyes were like armoured eyes.
Yeah.
Armoured eyes. I don't know what the vision would have been like through something like that.
No.
But yeah, they had armoured eyes. They were completely armoured all over. They had like armour. They had sort of thin plates over each set of legs running down their body. So armoured head, armoured middle section thorax, and armoured behind as well, pygidium.
Yeah.
Armoured eyes. These guys were armoured up to the max.
yeah. And they were their gills were under their legs, if I was right.
Oh yeah.
So they were obviously quite well protected as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
as we said, there was the different modes of life. So like some of them have like these really long spines on their back that were for defence, but also they think. There's one I've forgotten the name of it, but they think that it would turn upside down, and that the spines would stop it from sinking into the sediment. It sort of distributed the weight.
Oh, nice!
So then it would be able to live or like just inside soft sediment.
Okay.
And like deposit feed or filter feed.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't. It was like protected from sinking because of it. Even though sure that would have exposed the bottom.
Yeah.
Maybe it was partially inside the sediment.
Yeah, perhaps. May have had an armoured underside.
Maybe. And I guess these were hard parts all over, weren't they?
Yeah.
It was.
Yeah.
You know.
They were very well protected.
Yeah, and you don't need exceptional preservation to see them. There's a lot of fossils of these.
Yeah.
All throughout the Phanerozoic.
Yeah. Certainly because of that long time span. That's why you have. I guess that's why you have a lot. So,
yeah, are these one of the, because geological time is broken up into the different segments.
Yeah,
and all of that is based on fossils, right? So, is this one of the defining features of the Phanerozoic then? Because it only exists then.
I believe so. Yeah.
I guess So if you see a trilobite, you know
it's Phanerozoic.
It's Phanerozoic.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, not Phanerozoic, Paleozoic.
Paleozoic even, yeah.
Phanerozoic is the whole eon.
Yes, yeah.
Paleozoic.
Sorry, yeah. Yeah, no, definitely.
Well, there's also trace fossils of these.
Yeah,
right. Like Cruziana. So trace fossils are, you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
There's like things called Cruziana, which is like sort of you can see where it's been settled in the sediment, and then you can see it increasing its speed as it moves along because the gaps like between the marks
the chevrons
increase
and
then so it's like it must be moving faster because its whole body is lifted up off the ground rather than when they're even slower the back might have been sliding along the bottom,
dragged it along,
which is just really cool just to see like within an environment within just a small area you can see like it was stationary here and it was running and then sometimes the tracks just end and it's like something whatever it was running from got it it's like damn
poor trial bike. Have you ever seen any in the field?
I don't think I've seen them in the field. I've seen them in hand specimen like in the lab. Have you?
I'm just trying to think. No, I don't know. Maybe I have. I'm not sure. Maybe somewhere. Maybe in Wales somewhere, I think.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Cool.
It was quite nice.
Yeah.
It's just like you say, it's incredible to see.
Yeah, it is. Right, so that was all the organisms we were going to talk about with the Cambrian Explosion. Just thought because either they were cool or because they led on to the evolution of groups that we would recognise today. So that's it for this section.
So the next section that we're going to talk about is our new science section. So we'll discuss an article that we've is quite recent in terms of the scientific community. And so what we've got today is an article that we found from some Harvard lecturers, some Harvard and Rockefeller lecturers, and it's titled "How Army Ants Iconic Mass Raids Evolved."
Yes.
So quite an interesting topic that we found while we were reading it.
So basically the research was they had this a small colony of, they're called clonal radar ants, and it said in the article that these are some of the only ants that can be sort of kept in a lab for a long time for tests and stuff.
Yeah, indefinitely.
I wonder why that is. I don't know why. Why can't you eat army ants?
I don't know. Maybe it is the large colonies that they need to survive in.
Maybe if the colony gets too small, it just destroys breaks down.
Yeah.
I don't know. But anyway, so they only had small colonies for about 25 to 100. They said they were scaling it
10 to 100.
Oh, 10 to 100.
Yeah. No.
And basically they were looking at how, because these colonial radar ants have group raids rather than the mass raids of the army ants, because they're a smaller colony.
Yeah.
And they wanted to see how the army and mass raiders evolved through time. So as an analogue for that, they used the smaller, because the army ant colonies were smaller in the past.
Yeah.
And they thought the behaviour of the colonial radar ants will be analogous to the army ants previously.
Yeah. So effectively a proxy for how the army ants used to behave.
Yes.
Which produced some pretty interesting results. I mean.
Yeah. So, was you wanna?
Yeah. What they found was that there was this very quite clean, parallel correlation. That's the word I was looking for. A nice correlation between colony size and type of raid. So with the smaller groups, when they were using these clonal ants in smaller groups, they found that there were only sort of group raids that were taking part. Whereas as colony size increased, that sort of changed later on into sort of mass raids.
Yeah. But the behaviour of the raids was basically they saw similar characteristics in behaviour.
Yes. Yeah.
It's just that well, it would seem that the main distinguishing feature is the size.
Yeah.
So some of the features of the raids were things like when there was like a very small colony. When an ant left the nest to go and find food, it was less likely that other ants would then also leave the nest to find food.
Yeah.
So like, as the size of the colony increases, the size of ants that leave, it seems instinctively leave, also increases.
Yeah.
And that's how you end up with the mass raids.
Right. Yeah.
But some interesting behaviour that they sort of noticed was that when the colony is very small, it seems that only like one ant would leave at a time.
Yeah.
Whereas as it gets bigger, you get these things called pushing parties, right? So pushing parties are where when ants leave the nest, they'll only go a short distance, leaving pheromone behind them, and then it seems that they'll stop, turn around, and go back to the nest.
Yeah.
But there's other ants there at the edge of the nest waiting to leave.
Yeah.
So the ants that initially went out are either pushed back out by the ants waiting to leave, or they were replaced by those ants.
Okay. Yeah.
And then those ants follow the trails of the previous ants, and then go a little further, and then do the same thing.
Right.
Come back, and it goes on like that with more and more ants joining.
Okay.
And further further distance travelled each time because they're beating the previous one.
So they're getting further and further out from the nest each time.
Yeah, and that's how you end up with the long colonies of army ants.
Oh that you see.
Yeah, because I found it really interesting actually. That's how the mechanism. Because I always just assumed, they just leave.
Yeah.
They just
up sticks and go.
Yeah, they just go like.
Yeah.
I just sort of assume they just walk until they find something.
Yeah.
But they actually are like coming back and forward this whole time, which
and sort of making spreading their net wider and wider each time.
Yeah.
Through that.
I wonder how efficient that is, because you think metabolically, surely they're increasing the distance that they have to travel.
Yeah.
A lot.
Yeah.
By going back and forward every time.
Yeah.
If they'd have just gone.
Yeah.
Why can't they just go out?
Yeah, move to a new area sort of thing.
Is it? I guess maybe it's just to see, is there danger in the area?
Yes, yeah.
Very close to the nest or whatever.
Yeah.
Or maybe they'll adjust their... Maybe if they get a certain... I don't know if this is true or not, so this is speculation. But maybe if they go a certain distance and then get taken out by something...
Yeah.
Maybe the... sort of the trail, like the column changes in direction.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If they just were going out, maybe they'd all just go into the same area and they'd all just get caught by whatever.
It's like a safety kind of thing.
Yeah,
a safety mechanism.
I guess so.
I guess they, when an ant nest forms, they know that that's kind of a safe area.
Yeah.
And they'd kind of make a whole
defense system.
A whole defense system, and whole sort of network and structure of lookouts and I mean maybe the reason for them spreading further and further out is as well because they might strip everything in their local area.
It did say army ants are nomadic.
Yeah, right.
They don't really have a station. Well, they might have it for a while and then move on.
Yeah. Okay.
Because they're so big, they just decimate all the sort of local insect population.
Yeah, definitely.
That's great.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it just tells you how important they are ecologically.
Yeah.
If you just go through an area and just take everything out. It's all the same with spiders and wasps and stuff, isn't it? People are always like, oh, what's wasps? It's like to keep down the populations of insects.
So many invasive species. And I guess it was the same when I was in Australia with the spider population. Sort of it's kind of people were like, oh, why are there so many spiders here, or why are they so big, and why is it? And it's just because well, it's got to keep the insect population down because, especially in Oz, there's like flies everywhere and stuff.
Yeah.
So, So, in terms of the results of this, I think this study, about the ant mass raids. I think they pinned the timing on army ants. They said it was tens of millions of years ago that they made this change.
Yes.
So that sort of implies then that there was a sort of the change in colony size was several tens of millions of years ago.
Yeah.
So before that, which, I mean, on the evolutionary timescale of things, this podcast we've spoken about 540 million years ago. Just a few tens of million years isn't that long in terms of evolutionary things.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, tens of million years is still quite a considerable amount of time.
Yeah.
Before changing in sort of colony size.
Yeah. I guess it's interesting that these, me saying, is this really efficient? I guess it must be efficient because if they've been doing it for tens of millions of years and they're still here,
it
must be incredibly efficient.
Yeah. No, that's a good point.
For it to have not changed with different, and it's pretty interesting that different species of ants are doing the same thing, basically, just on different scales.
Yeah, the study said that, didn't it? It said that actually individual change behaviour between these two species was, very similar.
Yeah.
And I guess that's why they made a good analogue in the lab and stuff like that. But that's interesting stuff.
Yeah. So, it's cool that they're looking at this on like a sort of group level, but it'd be interesting to see in the future research about like what is happening for an individual ant to, why do more ants leave the nest when there's more of them, but on an individual level, like for an individual ant?
Yeah.
Why do individual ants do this sort of push party behaviour where they go in, stop, and then come back? Like, why is that? That would be interesting to see why that happens on an individual ant level.
Yeah, definitely, and I think they spoke as well about how they might look at the roles that each ant will take, or the contrasting roles.
That'd be cool. Okay, and we're now at the end of the podcast, so thank you very much for listening.
Yeah, thank you.
Hopefully you found at least some of that interesting.
Yeah. I guess we should say as well that both of our degrees were in geology and paleontology.
Yeah. So any questions on those kind of topics, we would be happy to answer, and we do actually know a little bit about what we're talking about.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Get in touch if you want to. If you want to ask a question or let us know about anything interesting.
And if you see David Attenborough, make sure you tell him about this podcast.
Yes.
Because the faster we get there, then the faster we can stop.
Let him know, seriously.
Yeah.